All right, in this video, I'm going to cover exactly how to handle the dreaded "I need to talk to my spouse" question. And in this video, I'll cover exactly three things. The first thing is going to be what are the kind of two types of spouse objections: the kind of permission-based spouse objection versus "Hey, I'm using my wife as a scapegoat." Now, the second thing I'll cover is how to tell is this actually a smokescreen objection, or if it's truly is coming back to the spouse and they need to talk to them. And then lastly, what are some proven scripts and some ways to actually overcome that? And this is the exact process that I've used to train over 50 admins, as well as my own in person clinical staff on how to handle this objection if it comes up in the clinic and help instill some confidence in them and how to not just like blast by this without actually asking some questions. So, that's what we're going to cover. I think this is a really tough objection for a couple different reasons. I think people don't know how to approach it. It's kind of a touchy subject, right? Because at the same token, I want to be respectful of someone's spouse. I want to be respectful of their desires, and but at the same token, I also want to know like what's their legit reason for not wanting to come back. And you guys have probably seen this before, where you'll schedule somebody either for their first visit or maybe for a follow up session if they come into the clinic, and you start talking to them. They sound bought in, and then, like, I need to talk to my spouse, no big deal. They'll go talk to the spouse and then they'll cancel all their follow up appointments. And it's like, well, what the heck happened? Right. And you guys kind of just chalk it up to a loss. And I think people handle this two different ways. I think you got a one group of people who will literally just they'll just kind of blast by it. They'll say, "Hey, I need to talk to my spouse," and you're like, "Oh yeah, no problem. Well, do you want to schedule your appointment?" And then like, "No," and then you just kind of leave it at that, which is a problem, right? We got to be able to have some frameworks to actually be able to handle it, besides just saying, "Well, okay, that's cool that you want to talk to her. Like, I guess let me know," right? Which is so that's obviously a problem. And then on the other end of this, I think you get a group of people who kind of they get some sales training and how to handle that, and then they come off as really sleazy like salesmen, and that kind of sucks, right? It's like, well, when do you plan to talk to your spouse? And like, let me jump on a phone call with her, and um, well, you can put a deposit down today, and I'll need a credit card. There's all this like weird sales resistant stuff, which is just a really crappy way to handle it too. And I think both people are at fault, and I'm going to show you a much more ethical way to actually handle it. So, the first thing we need to be able to identify, though, are what are the two types of spouse objections? And some of you guys are kind of confused by that because, like, what do you mean there's two types? And we have the kind of permission based, I need to talk to my spouse. Which what does that look like? And then we also have this other variation where it's, hey, I kind of need to talk to my spouse, but I don't really like. I'm kind of using her as the scapegoat in this situation. So, what is the permission based, and how do I recognize it? Because when somebody says they need to talk to their spouse, I'm in the same boat. I'm not going to spend $2,000 on something without talking to my wife, and that's just the relationship we have, and that's kind of some ground rules that we've had set up. And so, if I say I need to talk to my spouse, it truly is. I just need to jump back and have a conversation with her, run it by her, make sure everything's all good. But my wife and I also have some level of trust, and if I say, "Hey," uh, uh, I'm going to spend $2,000 on something. I feel really confident that it's going to help me. We just work through the logistics, the finances of it. She's probably going to be okay with it. And that's the case for some of your patients as well. And so if you're kind of a jerk to that type of person, and you're like, "Oh, well, you can't like, when are you planning to talk to your spouse and why?" And you give them that resistance, like it's going to turn them off a little bit, and it could certainly frustrate them. And that's obviously what we don't want to have happen. Now, you have this other end of the camp, and you've got somebody who just uses their spouse as kind of the scapegoat. This is the person that doesn't really trust you, and now they're using their spouse as a way for you to get out of the clinic, right? And uh, what does that typically look like? It's, hey, I need to talk to my spouse. Oh, okay, like no problem, and I'll give you some frameworks here at the end. But then these are the people that go, they talk to their wife, and they cancel every single follow up. They won't make contact again with you, and they kind of just ghost you, which is super frustrating. And there's some frameworks we'll cover here at the end that is going to be key for helping just triage that a little bit, because the scapegoat is somebody who doesn't really trust you, right? They don't think that you're going to be able to help them, or they're worried that they're going to invest the money and then they're actually not going to get the outcome that they want, and that's a problem, right? So you have to identify it, but then b, you have to provide some reassurance and make sure that they don't have questions, or what is their own internal beliefs, right? What are their own internal thoughts about the process of working with you? And if you can know what that is, then we know at that point it's just a permission thing. But if they go back to their spouse and they, hey honey, I need to spend $2,000. I don't really think, like, this doc wants me to see him, but like I don't really think it's going to work. Like, what do you think the spouse is going to say? He's 100% going to say, well, why would you schedule a follow-up appointment? Like, what makes you want to come back? And that's the group of people that we're after here. So that's the first big thing, is learning what the two types of permissions, or I need to talk to my spouse, objections are, being able to recognize them. And then from there, I need to know, is this a smokescreen, or is this actually a legit excuse? So what are these things? The smokescreen is much like the scapegoat, right? Where I'm just kind of throwing up my blinders, and I'm just throwing up something so that I can stop talking to you, or I can get out of the clinic as quickly as possible. Versus, again, this legit spouse objection is a legit spouse problem. There's that more like that permission piece. And so, how do I know which of those two it actually is? So, one thing I always try to do is, especially if I'm on the phone, right? Because most of what we're doing is front desk stuff. It's a little bit different in the office, but if I'm on the phone with somebody, I want to know. I'm going to try to schedule them for their eval, right, or their first appointment, and usually I'll try to schedule them for 2 or 3 more sessions. And if they won't schedule, or they refuse to schedule, that immediately makes me think, I just want to talk to my spouse first. Yeah, I'm not interested. Because if somebody's confident that you're going to be able to help them, like, they're probably going to schedule, and then they'll call back and let you know if there's anything that's different. But if they don't have a true intrinsic belief that you're going to be able to help them, no chance they actually schedule. So that's one big red flag, or one thing I like to pick up on. And if they don't want to schedule, I usually just like to ask them, well, like, I just want to be sure. I know you want to talk to your spouse. I totally get that. But like, is there any other reasons why you might be a little unsure about scheduling, or is there anything you're unsure about? And now that door is actually open from a conversation standpoint of, hey, how do we talk and how do we communicate about what your fear, doubt, or uncertainty is? And if that prospect, or that potential patient or client, has fear, doubt, or uncertainty in their own mind, then it doesn't matter what their spouse thinks. It only matters what they think. And that's how we know whether or not it's a smokescreen or an actual legit excuse. Is they're refusing to schedule, like they're definitely unsure. And now we just want to open that door for conversation. That's the big thing. I think most people, they immediately close the door when they hear a spouse objection. Is, I need to talk to my spouse, and they leave it alone, right? And what we don't want to have happen is that door to be left alone, because now I didn't get to answer any questions, right? I want to know what they truly think or believe, or what questions they have, or what concerns they have. And most people just want you to kind of hang up there, because most people like do. But I don't want to be a jerk. I don't want to be salesy. I don't want to be, trying to play Jedi mind tricks with them. I just truly want to know, well, what questions or concerns did you have? And then maybe now a money objection comes up, or maybe they think they need an MRI, or maybe they think they need to see some other specialist, or um, whatever other excuses patients tend to have kind of along the way here. Those are the big things I like to pay attention to. And so once you recognize it, right, or you know about the two types, now you can actually recognize it by, their desire or willingness to schedule, or if they even sound unsure. I mean, that's another thing I didn't really mention, is if they just sound a little unsure on the phone, like, well, yeah, I just kind of need to talk to my spouse. I'm just not sure about it. Sometimes I'll just say that. Or, well, yeah, I'd love to get you scheduled for your initial eval and your first appointment. Is that something you'd be interested in? And then now they're just like, yeah, I think I'm good, or yeah, okay. Like, they just have that uncertain tone, and now that opens the door to some of these spouse objections and those kind of things. So Now from there, what do you actually say to these people, right? Like, what are some scripting and what are some phrases? And so I'm going to give you some really like tactical things here. This is like stuff that I usually only give to our paying clients. So this is definitely good, solid info here. And we have to have some type of phrasing to say to these people. And so once I've answered some of their questions, like how do I just open the door and create an environment to have collaborative conversation? And the big thing that I want to do is, again, I don't want to sound like a sleazy jerk, but I also can't just hang up the phone or I can't just like close the door and not actually handle it. And so, what do I do in this situation? I like to acknowledge their objection first and foremost. Like there's plenty of studies out there to demonstrate that when I acknowledge someone's objection, I'm now more on their side and we're a little more aligned in what we think or believe. And they're more inclined to either A, open up and B, just inclined to trust you a little bit more. But if you raise the sales resistance by saying any other number of things. Well, when do you plan to talk to her? And why do you need to talk to your spouse first? Don't you make the decisions? Like all these just like salesy nonsense is a surefire way to just turn this patient off completely. And again, we've got to be able to handle this ethically. So I want to start by acknowledging their objection and appreciate them for being honest, right? So, hey, like I really appreciate you being honest with me here. And I get it that you want to talk to your spouse first. Like, totally get it. I usually talk to my spouse before I make purchases as well. So now I've softened the conversation. I've taken the pressure off me because sometimes you get caught in these situations and you're actually not sure what to say. And then same thing for them, like, the pressure's now off because it's, I just wanna talk to my spouse." Totally cool. No worries at all, like, I get it. Like, I've acknowledged it, and I've softened the mood a little bit. And now I haven't come off as this, like, aggressive sales figure who is, trying to, convince this person, to come in and create that sales resistance, right? So then from there, once I acknowledge it, I just want to make sure, and this is a great way to distinguish between the two types, is this a scapegoat or a permission thing? And the response you get to this is very critical, and you can steal this exact word for word. So, look, aside from chatting aside from chatting with your spouse, is there any other reason why you're less than 100% certain that you would want to work with us? And so now what I'm doing is it's helping me find out, is this truly a spouse thing or am I just using that as an excuse? And it opens the door for, is there anything else in your mind that keeps you from being unsure? Because if somebody's unsure, they'll give you every objection under the sun: money, insurance, cost, spouse, you name it, time, if they don't see the value in it themselves. And when I ask somebody, look, aside from chatting with your spouse, like let's just remove that completely. Like let's pretend your spouse isn't even here. You could say that too. Is there any other reason why you wouldn't be 100% sure that you actually want to work with us? And 100% is a very strong phrase, right? Like that's confidence. And if somebody says, "Nope, no problem," like I just want to chat with her, that's a permission thing. That's not a big deal, right? Like that's an easy, like you have that win in the bag. But now what's going to happen is for somebody who's using that as a smokescreen, they're going to just say, unless they're a really good liar, is, no, I just need to talk to my spouse. Or if they start to give you any other things, well, I'm a little, it's a little expensive. Or, well, like I was kind of hoping you guys took my insurance and you don't. Or, uh, my schedule's pretty busy. Like now you're getting all of these uncertainty type things, right? And when we get those uncertainty type things, that's a problem, right? Like that's what ultimately leads to somebody having somebody's going to schedule something and then just completely ignore you, and that's what I ultimately don't want to have happen. And so this now gives you some framework, it gives you some language, it gives you simple non-salesy things to actually say to somebody when they bring this up. And so um, those are the three big takeaways from the spouse objection. This should absolutely help you just have some frameworks, be able to identify it, and when it does come up now in the future, you're going to be able to handle this like a pro with what our admins are seeing, and exactly what I am, teaching my in-office staff on how to handle these objections as well. So, um, what I want you to do now, I want you to click the screen. There should be another video that pops up here. If you found this helpful, you're going to find some more helpful information about how to build, grow, and continue to overcome objections for your front desk, as well as just build a team that is going to convert really highly and want to actually hang out with you and continue to be your employee as opposed to having that constant turnover. So we'll see you again in the next video. Talk then.